I thought trusting my husband with my heart was safe until I found the messages that tore it apart. Part 1. The quiet before the storm. I always believed love was built on trust. Simple, unshakable, something that didn't need to be questioned. Our life together was comfortable, a steady rhythm of work, dinners, and late-night talks about the future. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. When I married him, I married the idea of forever, a promise whispered between us on our wedding day that no one could break. But love can be fragile in the quiet moments, the silences between words, the glances that linger just a second too long, the phone screens hidden out of sight. It's not always shouting and screaming, sometimes it's the little things that unravel everything. For months, he worked late. At first, I told myself it was just the job, the deadlines, the pressure. I kept busy, distracted myself with friends, my own work, and the endless chores of daily life. But the nights when he came home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, the sudden secrecy around his phone, and the way he'd pull away when I reached for him, these things piled up like storm clouds I refused to see. I remember the night I found the messages. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in every way. He said he was at the office late again. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I don't know what made me pick it up, but curiosity and unease twisted in my chest. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize, followed by words that burned me from the inside out. Can't stop thinking about you. Wish you were here. I miss you. The casual affection, the secret emojis, the plans to meet, all hidden behind the lie of long hours at work. My hands shook as I scrolled through hundreds of messages, each one a betrayal sharper than the last. The man I loved, who held my hand on bad days and promised forever, was living a double life. The quiet betrayal was worse than any fight or yelling match. It was the slow death of everything I believed we had. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream or demand answers. I sat in the dark, feeling numb, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that suddenly felt like a stranger's story. Days passed, and the tension between us thickened. He acted normal, pretending everything was fine, while I wrestled with the storm inside. The woman on the other end of the messages wasn't just some fleeting distraction. She was the secret that lived in our home, in the shadows of our bed, in the spaces where love used to be safe. Every smile he gave me felt like a lie. Every kiss tasted like betrayal. I wanted to run away, to scream, to break down, but I stayed, trapped by the life we'd built and the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could come back to me. But trust, once broken, is hard to repair. And sometimes, love isn't enough to save you from the silence that screams the loudest. Part 2. The cracks begin to show. The days after I found the messages were some of the hardest I've ever lived. It wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the weight of the secrets, the lies layered over years of shared memories, the feeling that the man I thought I knew was now a stranger. I tried to act normal at first. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, something he'd regret. But every time I looked at him, I saw the distance growing, an invisible wall building between us. He was there, physically at least, but emotionally, he was already somewhere else. One evening, I asked him where he'd been. He paused, eyes darting away before mumbling something about late meetings and work stress. I knew it was a lie. His phone, once locked and secretive, was now hidden even more carefully. I felt like I was living with a ghost, someone who shared my home but not my heart. I remember sitting on the couch, clutching a pillow, feeling utterly alone. The woman on his phone was always in my mind. Who was she? What did she have that I didn't? The questions ate at me, fueling nights of restless sleep and tear-filled mornings. Friends told me to leave him, to not waste my time on someone who didn't deserve me. But it wasn't that simple. We had a history, years of laughter, pain, dreams. I was scared to let go, terrified of the unknown that waited if I walked away. I started watching him more closely, trying to catch the truth in the little moments. The way his eyes softened when he thought I wasn't looking. The quick flicker of guilt that crossed his face when I asked about his day. There was still love buried beneath the hurt, but it was suffocating under the weight of lies. One night, I found him staring at our wedding photo, fingers tracing the frame like he was searching for something lost. I wanted to reach out, to tell him I was willing to fight if he was. But the silence between us was deafening, and I realized that healing wouldn't come from me alone. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair. It was about the broken promises, the hidden truths, and the slow unraveling of everything we thought would last forever. It was the painful awakening to the reality that love, even when strong, sometimes isn't enough to hold two people together. As the days slipped by, I knew I had a choice: to stay and try to rebuild from the ashes, or to walk away and find my own peace. Neither path was easy, and both felt like losing a part of myself. But in the quiet moments, when the house was empty and the pain settled like dust, I realized something important. I had to choose me, because no matter how much I loved him, I couldn't lose myself in the shadows of his betrayal. Part 3. Picking up the pieces. Choosing myself wasn't a sudden decision. It was a slow, painful process of peeling back layers of grief, confusion, and fear. The moment I finally admitted to myself that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his lies, I felt both relief and terror. Relief, because I was no longer pretending. Terror, because the future was unknown and terrifyingly wide open. The first step was setting boundaries. I told him I needed space to think, to breathe, to heal. He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew deep down that his choices had broken something unfixable. Our conversations became scarce, stiff, filled with things left unsaid. The house felt hollow, a place where memories clashed with silence. I spent long hours walking in the park near our home, trying to find clarity among the rustling leaves and distant city noises. It was in those quiet moments that I started reconnecting with myself. I remembered who I was before the betrayal, my dreams, my strength, my worth. Friends and family noticed the change. Some supported me wholeheartedly. Others urged me to forgive and forget, to save my marriage no matter what. But forgiveness wasn't a gift I could give blindly. It had to be earned, and so far I wasn't sure if that was possible. In the evenings, when the world felt heavy and loneliness crept in, I wrote. Letters I never sent, pouring out my pain and anger, my hopes and fears. Writing was therapy, a way to make sense of the chaos inside me. At work, I threw myself into projects, finding solace in deadlines and small victories. I reconnected with old passions, took classes I'd always postponed, and rebuilt my confidence piece by piece. Slowly, I saw glimpses of the woman I wanted to be, whole, independent, and unafraid. But healing wasn't linear. Some days the memories hit like a tidal wave. The laughter we shared, the promises whispered in the dark, the vision of a future now shattered. I cried for the life I lost, for the man I thought I knew, and for the love that betrayed me. Yet with every tear, I grew stronger. I learned that pain could be a teacher, that brokenness could lead to growth, and that the hardest battles often bring the deepest transformation. One night I confronted him honestly, not to accuse, but to understand. We spoke, raw, painful, real. He didn't have all the answers, but admitting the truth was a step toward something new, whether together or apart. This story isn't about perfect endings. It's about survival, about finding light when the darkness seems endless. It's about the courage to rebuild after betrayal and the hope that even shattered hearts can heal. Part 4. Finding strength in solitude. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks stretched on, each one a testament to my growing resolve. I no longer waited for him to fix what was broken. I realized I had to do the work myself. Healing wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about reclaiming my identity and rebuilding my life on my own terms. I began setting new routines. Morning runs replaced restless nights, meditation replaced anxious thoughts, and books became my refuge from the storm inside. I reconnected with old friends, met new people, and slowly rediscovered joy in simple moments. The warmth of sunlight on my skin, the scent of fresh coffee, the sound of my own laughter. But the hardest part was learning to be alone without feeling lonely. For so long, my life had revolved around us, the couple, the team, the dream we shared. Now, I had to face the silence that followed the end of that dream. Nights were the toughest, the empty bed a reminder of everything lost. Yet in solitude, I found strength. I learned to listen to my own voice again, the one that had been drowned out by betrayal and heartbreak. I rediscovered dreams that belonged to me alone, ambitions shelved for years, and passions I'd forgotten I had. Therapy helped too. Speaking to someone who understood the layers of pain and anger allowed me to unpack the tangled emotions I carried. I learned that healing isn't linear, and setbacks don't mean failure. Each small victory was progress. One day, as I stood in front of the mirror, I saw not a broken woman, but someone battle-worn and beautiful in her resilience. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I was more than the pain. I was a survivor. I knew the future was uncertain. Whether or not we found a way back to each other, I had found my way back to myself. And that was the greatest gift betrayal could never take away. Part 5, A New Beginning. Months passed since that painful revelation. The rawness of betrayal softened into a quiet strength that now guided my steps. I no longer defined myself by the shattered pieces of my past, but by the resilience I built from them. James and I reached a crossroads. We had faced the abyss together and were left with a choice: to rebuild a relationship or to part ways with dignity. It wasn't an easy decision. We spent long hours talking, laying everything bare: fears, regrets, hopes, and truths that had been buried beneath years of silence. In the end, we chose different paths. Not because the love was gone, but because sometimes love means knowing when to let go. We parted with tears, forgiveness, and the understanding that some wounds heal better apart. But my story didn't end with loss. It was the beginning of rediscovery, of finding happiness within myself, nurturing friendships, and opening my heart to new possibilities. I learned that betrayal is not the end of the story. It's a painful chapter that challenges us to become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. It teaches us the value of trust and the courage to believe again, in others, and most importantly, in ourselves. If you are walking through heartbreak now, know this: your pain is real, but so is your power to rise. The road ahead may be uncertain, but it's yours to choose. And every step forward is a victory over the silence that once held you captive.